Let's call to order and take a roll call.
Mike Davenport.
Here.
Christopher Espinoza.
Here.
Jenny Hagstrom. Here. Gary Pavasich.
Here.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler. Here. Nancy Kupka.
Here.
And Caitlin Vincent.
Here.
Thank you.
We have a quorum to stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We start with student perspectives.
All right, I'll invite Courtney up to kick it off.
Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see all of you. I am really happy to introduce to you a few of our members from our theater program, and they're going to talk to you tonight about their show that was chosen to perform at the Illinois High School Theater Festival just a couple of weeks ago. And so I'm going to introduce them, and I'm going to do last names too. I can do this. So, so if you guys want to stand, and you can come over here. And these five young people are very highly involved in theater. I think that I see them in every show, every dance, every event that happens in the auditorium. They are so involved, and it's so amazing. I'm pretty sure that Robbie could run lights for every single thing with his hands tied behind his back and his eyes closed. So all of these guys are really involved in our fine arts program. And so we have Zoe Petro, Robbie Boucher, Sydney Miller, Matt Sirota, and Natasha Fugate. And they're going to talk to you tonight about how their show got chosen. And just as a side note, I do believe it is the first show that has been chosen from North High School to perform at the Illinois High School Theater Festival. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
And I will be your clicker, so just tell me when to go, okay?
Okay. All right, so obviously Theater Fest, and then so we first started way back in May, if you would believe it. So I am the assistant director, stage manager. We have the lighting designer, and then we have two of our lead actors throughout the whole show, and then Natasha was a lead through the original Bomedy, and then had to step away to go do the all-state show. And so we started out with this. It's a melding of both kind of groups.
Yeah, so basically this show starts in May, and it's our varsity shows, which means it's the best of the best. We cast the year before, and then we open in August. So our original production is the varsity play. The actors, you see all those awesome pictures. That's in our studio theater, 248, and that was at Downsville High School. And this was before we went to the theater festival. So we started here. It was a really new play to do that we haven't done before. It was wrapped, and it was in the studio theater with microphones and stuff, which is not a typical show we usually do. We don't do a lot of raps and a lot of crude humor usually in theater, which is really weird. So that was the big seller for the show, and it went off with a success. If you guys want to say more about that.
Yeah, so something that makes the varsity show different than a normal show is that it is very important to create relationships between the cast and the crew, just creating a strong company all together. So that means that some crew members took on acting roles on stage, and then actors such as ourselves would take on roles in crew, building the sets that you see up there, and just building the things that we would be performing on and performing with, like props, and wearing costumes, which was really cool.
And it was especially fun because we have such a great basis of student leadership in our theater program. 99% of the stuff that we made for this show was all led by students. We had a student design the lighting. Our props were headed by students. The actors were able to dive in a lot with their work, but sound also has a big part. We all are able to help design and help create and be part of the behind-the-scenes process, which I think is especially fun, especially with a varsity play, because you have a smaller group of kids that can really just pull apart a play and make it something that they're really proud of. So that was especially exciting.
Okay, and the next slide. And then so if you don't know what this is, so Illinois High School Theater Festival is run by the Illinois Theater Association. And so the way that you get a show to go to state is you have to have somebody from this association come and adjudicate, is what they call it, your show. And so we were the first show to be adjudicated, because usually they aren't done that early. And so a guy came in and he watched our show, and then afterwards he would give us feedback. He gave us responses. He asked the designers about their process and the actors about what had been going on, and we got a chance to get real good information about what we had just done. And then we didn't actually find out we were going to Theater Fest until Thanksgiving. we found out right after we actually concluded our one-act production, and we found out our closing night right after all of like everything had been taken care of, and we had to rebuild the whole show from the ground up with all new materials in like a few weeks, like 2 weeks,
Yeah,
3 weeks. It was
because we had winter breaks, so it was
And
like
we weren't working.
we were
over winter break.
celebrating, and it was like, oh, Christmas time, great, and then
Natasha and Robbie, do you guys want to talk about like the kind of like adjudication process? A little bit of that.
Yeah, so like, the adjudicator came in and we just had this conversation with him about, you know, the design process and whatnot. It was not like a, you did this wrong, this is bad, I don't like this. It was like a, why did you choose this? Like, it was an open conversation with another theater artist, which was really good for like students like us to learn and like just get honest feedback from like professionals. Like this guy like does costumes for like I don't even know, but he was blinked out. He knew what he was talking about. Yeah. So, anything else you want to add, Natasha?
Yeah, so pretty much what he did was he just asked for like specific groups. He's like, choose one of your actors to like speak on your behalf and then just talk about their process a little bit. He did the same thing for designers. Like he was like, choose a costume designer to speak, choose like a scenery designer, a scenic designer to speak. And then there was like 3 speakers, I think, roughly. And then we just told him our process. And then afterwards he gave us feedback as was mentioned. So yeah.
And then so in the next slide. So the next slide is when we had to start redesigning everything because we were put in a really big concert hall at U of I because it's this massive, massive area. And we went from, if you know where 248 is in Downers Grove North, it's a real small area where we went from, I think it was about like a 30-foot wide stage to a 64-foot wide stage. And that had no lighting and was on hardwood floors. So it was a major difference. And then
yeah, so basically we kind of just had to like go like dig in our rooms and like crack open the script from August and like we just kind of ran back into it. We picked up the plans from back in August to start rebuilding the set and start creating everything, and we were lucky enough to hold new auditions for this new show because we had to fill spots for Natasha, for example, who was committed to Allstate, who couldn't be in our production, and other roles, and we just wanted to make it like bigger and better. So we were able to have understudies come in and fill up all of those roles because we were not going to take any chances on anything going wrong with this production. And so we were basically just able to get back into it and teach these new people joining our show what the whole story is about and everything we've created and all the creative juices and energy that went into all of it. So it was really exciting to talk to my understudy and like help him figure out this crazy rap show and teach all of the different beats and flows. And it was really exciting. It was really fun to dive back into it. And also at the same time, start frantically building this set and learn how to put it up and put it down like we would need to at U of I.
And
Sydney, you could talk about, like, Sydney was kind of a leader in our, like, we had load-in groups. Because we had this massive 3-building set that had to go up in 90 minutes. So both of them did, like, a really, like, amazing job doing load-in, especially considering you guys hadn't done a whole lot of crew work prior to it, and you jumped in, and it, like, you guys had, like, some, like, the hardest, like, you had, like, in my opinion, the hardest part to build.
Yeah, so my load-in experience was we had an hour and a half from the time that the doors opened for us to get into the space until the time that the doors opened for our audience to come into the auditorium, the concert hall that we were in. So my job specifically was to bring in some set pieces from the truck, which was a very long walk. And then I was building that house structure that Zoe was talking about. And it really took up until the doors opened for me to step out of my crew shoes into my the shoes of my role as an actor, and that process was probably 5 to 10 minutes where I had to be in full costume, full hair, full makeup, get my mic on, do a very, very quick mic check, and be ready on stage for the audience to see our show.
It was crazy. I mean, you think 90 minutes, like, okay, they put up the set. No, it's like, it's a 2-story set. You gotta put these lights, you put the sound, you gotta set up everything that would usually take like months in 90 minutes. So we like rehearsed, loading it in, loading it out multiple times, just so that we could head down to the signs. This goes here in the truck, this goes here, this comes out first. This needs to move here, so that when we had those 90 minutes, we were done. And the people that were like at Illinois, sorry, they were kind of wowed because we came in there with such preparation. The union guys were like, okay, we're just not going to do anything because you guys got it. So,
Photo, Robbie?
oh yeah, and then and the center photo is me in our hotel room. That was a little before show programming session, just to make sure all the cues were good. But that's me in the hotel. That's kind of a funny picture to show.
Our director, Mr. Moses, literally had everything down to 4-minute increments for our whole load-in process to make sure that everything for each team was meticulous.
We
So
rehearsed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was rehearsed. We took it up at least like 5 times, up and down.
Yeah.
And then
the whole thing.
we're throwing curveball with the bomb throw on that day, so that
Yeah.
it was kind of stressful because they were like everything shut down, and then we were like, what? So it was like 90 minutes minus some because we couldn't get in at our exact time.
We didn't know if our first show would even happen. So
Yeah.
thankfully we were able to
We
get
were
a ton.
we were one of the only shows that they actually let open at the start, and that's because we had 7 people go in on the early bus, but like literally the early bus got there as the alarm was put on, so we all had to sit in the Cranert Center for a pretty long time. And it was me and another girl who had like a college interview we had to get to, and it was absolute chaos because they weren't telling anybody what was going on. And so it wasn't on our side of the campus, but obviously they had to lock everything down and take the threat seriously. And so it was like the craziest. I think it was like an hour, 2 hours of like our lives. And then we were the first show to open that morning. It was kind of insane because they wanted us to be right there so that everyone would have something to do right away. So we can go. You guys want to talk about your?
Sure. So all of this craziness that we've talked about finally came to a head, and we were able to perform on time for a great audience. It was so cool because obviously this is Theater Fest, so you're performing for a bunch of theater kids. So they're gonna pick out things that you're doing that they know are super special and super cool. So it was so fun to be able to present our art and be like, this is our crazy show. And it was weird compared to the other shows that went to Theater Fest. We were definitely an oddball because it's Shakespeare rap whatever. So it was definitely it was strange, and it was a new environment, and it was all this craziness, but it was just so special. I think might be like my favorite theater experience, I guess, at North. I just don't know what could compare to this because it was, this coming May would be a year since our original audition, so it's been a long process between the original show and the new show. So it was a great final performance for all of us, and I think it was really special.
They loved it.
Yeah.
The kids there, they were cheering and hollering, and it was insane.
Yeah.
They loved it.
Yeah, our audience alone was probably about 3 times bigger than our original audience. So just hearing those laughs and hearing the cheers for every single line, even some of the lines that we didn't even think would get a reaction, got a reaction, which was just so fulfilling and so amazing. I was beaming on stage. It's crazy.
I think my favorite thing was I was in the lunch line the next day because we were gonna leave in a few hours, and we were getting food before we saw our next show. And these people in front of us were talking about how it was life-changing. And it's so cool to hear. Because how often do you hear that the show that you put on in high school was it made someone look at life differently? They were because it made them excited to learn about Shakespeare. Because Shakespeare is usually oh my god, I have to do Shakespeare this year. But they were this makes me so excited to do Shakespeare next year. This makes me so excited to do the show that my director picked out. And that's it's just really heartwarming to hear that it actually had an impact and it made a difference in people's lives. And I think every single person all around said that they had some kind of experience like that.
Oh yeah. So once all of our performances were done, I think we can move on to strike. Oh, perfect. So we basically take down the set one last time in the Cranert Hall, and then we get it into our trucks, and we get it all home after our whole shenanigans of Theater Fest, going to see other shows and stuff. And then we brought it all back to the DGN auditorium, and we kind of took it apart piece by piece, because in the truck it's kind of just walls and bigger portions. And then we finally got to just kind of take everything apart at Strike. And it's definitely a lot of work, always. We always do strikes for shows, and it's always very strenuous. But by the end of it, because this has been such a crazy experience, it was it was just so rewarding to finally be able to finish this big show. Do you want to talk about?
Yeah,
Craziness.
and then after this strike, we have been starting some new post-strike, post-show traditions with our new director. And the one for this show was that we had the full company sitting in a circle, and we just gave positive memos and just goodbyes to everyone. We actually used a ball of yarn and would throw it around,
Like a
create
compliment web.
a compliment web, of course. And I just used this experience. I used this moment to look around the circle, see the new cast and the new crew, and then just also reflect on the original company who brought this show to where it was now. And just thinking about those new people that I met, the show that I fell in love with, it really helped me fall in love with theater. I started doing more shows after that because it's just one of my favorite shows. And it's just crazy. And I loved it so much. So yeah, it's crazy to say goodbye.
It was just, so we all, as like a DGN theater, we all had like this really life-changing experience going to Theater Fest. It was probably like the most immersive experience we're ever gonna have as high schoolers. But then Natasha went off to Allstate because Allstate, little blurb, like they essentially everyone in the state's allowed to interview to be an Allstate, and then they choose who they like the most, and then they put on a show so that the whole state, it's the best of the state, putting on this amazing show in the largest performing arts center at Allstate, and it's like it is like the best of the best. It was amazing. Natasha.
Yeah, so if you flip the slide, we're going to move on to the Allstate show, which this year was Shrek. So as we touched on, we had interviews back in June, I think, of this year to establish who would be in the company. So I was selected to be a part of the Allstate company, and it was an incredible experience. So you can flip the slide. Okay, so we're going to talk fast. Allstate, okay, hold on, let me reevaluate. So I was, my title for Allstate, I was a part of this props and special effects crew, and I do a lot of prop work at North. So this was a huge honor to me to be like considered like best in state for props. And like these are just some of the stuff that I made and I like collaborated with a lot of people. I did a lot of things I thought I'd never do. I exploded a bird on stage. So these were just some of the projects that I had the most fun doing. And you can flip the slide again. And one of the things that I loved so much about Allstate is I got to meet so many new people that had the same passions I did, and like that weren't just like the people that I've known for 4 years. And as much as I love all the kids at DGN who I work with, it was so like refreshing to like meet new people and to like be like, oh, here's my pre-show traditions, what's yours? And we would do each other's pre-show traditions before shows. And like just learning from everybody around me who has the same interests as me. And then you can put the slide again. And then another thing that you might not think about as much for a team is all the adults that were in charge. They were chosen a lot like us. They had interviews, they were chosen, and they're most volunteers. They're volunteers at heart. And our director for Bomedy, Ariel Moses, is going to be technical directing next year's Allstate, which is She Kills Monsters. And scenic designing. So, but the adult team that I had for Allstate, they made the show so much fun. It was so stressful, but they were lighthearted. They would like crack jokes as they walked past you in the hall. It was incredible. And they also know so much. And then you can flip the slide again. And then I also want to just touch on the challenges of state. So we had to build an entire show, and I think it was like 18 days it came to. We had a performance at Downers Grove South on December 18th. So we did not have that weekend to build. We had to be done that weekend and ready to perform. So, and then right after we did that performance, we packed it all up and we went to U of I, where we had some stuff to finish. So then we had to learn a whole new stage, a whole new space, because we had been attuned to DGS's stage. And now we have this bigger space with new scene changes and like everything with like new transitions, and we are trying to put on a show. And I think altogether we put together 5 performances for our time at U of I, and then the Allstate company went down a week early so we could practice those transitions, finish up anything that needed to be finished, and it came together. And then next slide. So overall, I'd say that doing the Allstate production was like
top 5 best experiences in my entire life. I met so many amazing people that I hope to keep in my life for years to come. And I've learned so much from them, and I have just memories that will last forever. Think I made it?
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or?
Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah.
I got one.
Like
Now, have you been, I'm sorry, did you say? Oh. Have there been other adjudication?
So
Do they adjudicate all of our,
so essentially what it is the process of going to state is you have to submit your show to the theater
Right.
board. And the reason why we've never done it before is because if I'm sure everyone remember like Mr. Papa George and Mrs. Velasquez, they were both on the committee that chose the shows.
Ah.
And so if you're on a committee that chooses the show, your school's not allowed to submit. And then additionally next year we're not allowed to submit again because Moses is the technical director and scenic designer, which means he's way too involved there. And so there are like qualifications, and they choose it based on like what's like the best show and like what's going to give the students at Theater Fest like the most rounded experience. There were musicals, there were like more like traditional Shakespeare, there were more like plays, there's like a play that goes wrong. It was a very wide selection of shows. We were definitely still the oddball, but like
not necessarily a bad thing to be the oddball.
Yeah,
Anything else?
Any other questions?
It's great.
it just seems like so much fun to
We could ask for an impromptu,
it's a lot of work,
Oh, yeah.
but it's fun for you to meet everyone and see what it's really like to have the pressure. I mean, can you imagine what people are like that are on Broadway and stuff, trying to get their shows produced and that.
We
So
were
that's-
watching them load the truck, and it was really stressful for us, and we weren't doing anything.
Yeah, what if they drop something? You know?
Very cold as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was that cold weekend. Yeah,
It
yeah.
was so cold, but there were so many people there, and like I think the audience really made it worth it.
Yeah.
Like I think everyone for us, I'm sure also the same thing with Shrek. Like the way that the audience received the show made all of like the 10 p.m. nights, like the sweat, the tears, all of that worth it, just to like hear them love the show.
I think overall we've performed Bomedy, I think 6 or 7 times. So just
Yeah, between
we
all of
closed
it.
it in the very best way possible with the very best people, with truly our family. So just such a good goodbye.
Was this recorded?
I think that the Theater Fest one,
The Theater Fest one was recorded. The
So we
original one
do-
was also recorded.
We have a recording. We have multiple recordings of the show from the original space we performed it in our own auditorium as a benefit show for all of like the friends and family who wanted to go see it, and then we have a recording of it actually at U of I.
Okay. Is it
Is it
online
available?
somewhere?
I'm not certain it's a legal recording.
Okay.
I'll see if I can find one for you.
It's not available yet either.
But we're allowed to have recordings for educational purposes. We have them for all of our shows just for educational archiving. So we have the recording, and we just don't have
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
super
We'll figure it
access to it. Moses has access to it.
Dr. Matt will get it sometime.
Yeah.
Excellent.
We want the bootleg copy.
This is being recorded, you know.
We would never record anything illegally.
Good answer, good answer.
Piracy is a crime.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys all for coming
Thank you.
tonight.
Congratulations.
All right, next up is Caitlin.
Okay, so this week at South is our Spirit Week. So we kicked off the Monday with PJ Day. So it was super nice. You know, Monday's not always the best day of the week, but we got to wear our PJs to school, which made it a little bit better. And then we'll have different dress-up days each day of the week, as well as different activities like an access. I know when I was during my PE class, I had to help my teacher with beaded necklaces that everyone in Access will get, and then there'll be a school-wide like rock, paper, scissors challenge. So little fun activities during the day. And then last week we had 2 clubs at our school that were selling blue Mustang cups, kind of like the red Starbucks cup in the wintertime. We were selling blue cups to raise money for a shelter in Westmont for people who need help. They can go there to get resources. So all the proceeds to that went to the shelter in Westmont, and as a like incentive to buy the cup, they were giving discounts for root beer floats. So during your lunch period today, you could have gotten a root beer float, which is a fun way to celebrate Spirit Week. And then at the end of the week, we'll have our big spirit assembly with all the sports teams kind of sharing about their season and a bunch of games like tug of war. As a senior, I'm really excited to win the Spirit Jug this year. And then another big thing is the conference win for the girls basketball team. I am a little biased as I am on the team, but it was a big thing since it was the first time we've won since 2001. So it's been like 20 years since we won conference. So it was a big deal to us, and we're looking forward to our regional game next week, which is actually against Downers North. So a little matchup again, but we're looking forward to that. And then a new thing that we're bringing back since COVID is our Turnabout Winter Dance. We had it, I went to it for the first time freshman year, and we haven't had it since. So bringing that back will be fun, just giving students another thing to do during the winter, and again, just building community, building off of our Spirit Week. So exciting week ahead for us.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yes, and good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We know Downers Grove will win.
Yes,
We
guaranteed.
will cheer for both sides. Okay, do we have anybody?
I have no comment slips.
No comment slips for the substantive visitors. So we'll move on to the board workshop, review of state accountability measures.
Getting there. All right, as we're heading into the time of year that is assessment season, when everybody's taking standardized tests, we're bringing back some of the information we shared back in the fall, September and November, around that time. And then in response to some information that we've seen circulated or shared in a variety of settings, we just want to make sure that we are clear in the messaging of how this information is interpreted and used. There is a wealth of information in the Illinois State Report Card, but a lot of it is numbers without background. So without knowing some of the history or how the tests are structured or those kinds of things, it's easy to misinterpret some of the information that's there. So just as we head into this next season of accountability, we just want to take an opportunity to share a couple of things. So as the board has seen a lot of this before, this is going to be a pretty high overview of some of this, but if you have questions, jump on it. Just to review that we receive a designation where both schools are commendable, that is calculated 75% off the academic indicators and 25% off the student success indicators. These indicators are based on research as to what are the things that predict post-secondary success. So obviously graduating from high school is the goal, the primary goal of high school, right? And is the greatest predictor of post-secondary success. So that's where you end up with these different weights that are in there. You know, so things like SAT, English, and math are weighted much lower. They themselves are not great predictors of post-secondary success. In combination with other things like GPA and activities at school and those, you know, building that whole portfolio of students is what really predicts post-secondary success. And that's why you're seeing colleges move to test optional settings or, you know, those types of things, and they want to see the full breadth of a student's experience to better predict if they're going to be successful after high school. Same thing if you're going directly from high school into the world of work. They're not looking at your test scores, right? They want to know what you have done, what your skills are, what you're prepared to do. We talked more in detail about this in November. I don't want to dive into all of these pieces, but that's the big overview of how our score is determined. If you go on the website, you'll see a variety of different pieces of performance snapshot. Graduation rate is at 94% from last year. We're at where we were pre-pandemic. And a reminder for the board that currently any student that continues in special education is a reduction in that graduation rate. So students that are continuing at T99 or in the special education program with us count against that graduation rate. And we're currently working with the LEND Mandate Committee and Policy Committee. Dr. Prentice from Hinsdale and I have been working on legislation that will be introduced in this legislative session to correct that so that our T99 students and students continuing in special education don't count against our graduation rate as it does there.
Do we know what it is if we back those students out?
I haven't calculated. If we backed out our special
If you backed
education
out your
students.
special
Well, we've done it before, but they factor in even to the 5th and 6th year, so
Yeah.
it gets.
But it was like, I think we did before, it was like 98, 99.
Yeah, we were really
Yeah.
close.
It was really
Yeah.
close,
It was
yeah.
2 or 3% higher.
Yeah,
Yeah.
than what it is, okay.
I mean, we could calculate
Because
it.
that's really a
Yeah, it does.
bad number
Well,
because
and
those
I'm going to
kids-
illustrate a couple of these tonight where Illinois does it different than other states, and it actually makes schools in Illinois look worse than schools in other states because of the decisions we've made in just how we calculate the numbers like this, all right? So graduation rate remains strong comparatively. Ninth grade on track, remember that's, you know, what we're looking at that first year of high school and are they getting enough credits to graduate at the end? And we've spent a lot of time last year and then again this year making sure that we're getting as many students on track as possible. And then if a student isn't on track, we're really focusing on that next year to make sure we catch them up so that they're on track to graduate. Chronic's absentee rate was at 23.3%. I will tell you that number is higher this year. Absenteeism at school, actually in work and across the country, is a thing that is much higher than it has been in the past. We're still lower than other schools in DuPage County and across the state. However, this is a number that's ticked up this year in the first semester, and we're working really hard at both schools to try to drive that number back down.
Do we have an idea of why it seems to be this
Well,
high?
I mean,
Is it,
kids worked from home for 2 years, right? So there is definitely a perception of I can work from home and I'll be okay. The other thing is we've worked really hard to make sure that we're supporting kids when they're out of school. So before, it would really negatively penalize a lot of students if they were out, and we've done a lot of things to support students when they're out. So the impact of being out
Consequences.
is
great.
not as tough. Plus, we're encouraging everybody, if you're sick, stay home, right? We went through multiple years of a pandemic, and we've told everybody, if you don't feel well, stay home. And then there's a big push around mental health, right? With mental health days and those kinds of things, where we're saying if you're so stressed, if you need a day to catch up, if you know, you need to go see somebody, take that time and do that. So all of those things are
But
factoring in.
those days don't count, right?
They do count
They do
against
count
us.
return,
The
oh, I
state
thought they
high
didn't count,
mental
okay.
health days count against
so are
us.
we working with the state maybe to change the way that is
We've talked
recorded
to-
also?
yes. Yeah, we're trying, but
Because, you know, if we're encouraging kids to stay home if they're not feeling well, or if they're having, you know, stress issues and things, you know, should that really be counted against us?
that is a great question that we are working on at the state level, but,
Okay, all right.
yeah. But those things have changed since these accountability measures were put
Well,
in
I think
place.
COVID has changed a lot of things in our lives, and some for the better and some for not the better. But, you know, holding us accountable for some things is not always
Well, and
the answer either.
it used to be, we were talking about this in our leadership team the other day. Chronic absenteeism used to be a predictor that you were likely to fail. That is no longer the case anymore. We have students that meet that threshold of chronic absenteeism that are getting straight A's. They're getting their work done, they're coming and meeting with with their teachers during access and resource, during office hours. They're being productive and they're proving that their learning is what we expect, that their performance is what we expect. So it's not as much of a predictor as it was back when they were writing these accountability measures. So things are different now. We just need to, you know, eventually respond to those changes in the world.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to see if those students, you know, like in college or in the workforce, if that is carrying on and what their success rate is. That would be very interesting, so.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see how the world changes moving forward.
To say that's always been the piece that we've been missing though, Terry. Just about everything. You know, we don't know, I mean, we don't get, See, our partner districts get all the feedback from us, so it's much easier for, say, District 58 or 68 to look at how their students are matriculating and how they perform here and where they have some difficulty, and then focus on those things. We don't get, there isn't a next level that sends information back to us.
Don't we have questionnaires that have gone out to our students?
Sure,
and-
we have,
and that-
but
But
it's not
they're
the
not
s-
always reliable
No.
information, right?
You get a very low response rate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
People have moved on from high school at that point.
yeah.
So, but all those things that we were looking at before are all things that are pretty well proven, that these are the experiences and talents and knowledge, approach that you need to be successful after high school, no matter what it is that you're going to do.
Right, it's predicting
Right.
success.
Chronic absenteeism is full day, right? And
You need to be,
Or-
it's very complex. You need to be in school for 300 minutes to be counted to be there for a full day. So anytime you're here for less than 300 minutes, you're absent.
In terms of the stat.
In terms of the calculation that goes to the state.
so it may not appear that you're, like, if
You
you're,
can have pieces of a day, so a student can
Okay.
be absent for half a day.
Okay.
But it's calculating each half day, and it goes on the number of days of school that school year or for that student. So even a student who comes later in September is not gonna have the same number of school days as a student who's with us from the start of school. But it's 10% of the school year.
10%.
For that individual
Okay.
student. Yeah.
okay.
Very complicated.
Yeah.
All right, SAT scores. We've looked at these a variety of ways over the years, and as I've explained to the board repeatedly, right, that really the best way to look at a standardized test score is in the series of tests where you could test a student, the same student year over year, and measure their growth over time. But a combination of switching test scores, the pandemic, all of those pieces has made it so that has not been possible for us. The next best thing is to compare a group of students to the students taking that test that year, because they've all come up at the same time through similar conditions. And when you go to apply for a university, if they are using those scores, you're in that cohort that's all being compared to one another. So what I've done here for the board to kind of give you an idea of that over time is I've taken our district and I've converted that score for that year as if our district was a student in the country, right? So you could see how we would compare to all the other students across the country if District 99 was a kid. That makes sense? And that's what the percentile shows us, is where we would fall year to year. You can see, this is why it gets difficult comparing groups of kids to groups of kids, right? You really need to compare them to themselves. It's really hard for us to know, did we fail our kids in math in 2018, or was that just a group of students that, like, math wasn't their thing? It's hard to know. So 2019, we were at 61st percentile across the country. So if you lined us up with all the other kids, we'd be at that 61st spot, right? The next year, we dropped down to 40. That seems concerning if that trend continues with the percentile scores. But then the next year, we're back up to 61, right? So if you look at it over time with all of our scores, this is what you see, right? If you would look at the just raw scores, it would appear as though our scores were plummeting over time. But if you take a look at us in comparison to the nation, you'll see we reside, this is kind of where we sit in District 99 for the past 5 years. Now, in 2020, there's no score because of the pandemic. But you'll see we kind of sit in that band. For better or worse, that's where we're at. And test scores, when you look at them in comparison to all of the kids taking them year to year, we're kind of sitting in the same spot.
Well, actually, I think that's kind of promising in a way. I think back to when my oldest first was taking the ACT at the time, because that was the series we were in. And we had him take that test 4 times, and we got him some tutoring, right, to help him with that, because it was a rather high-stakes test, right? Now, here we are, where many, if not most, colleges are looking at SAT, ACT as test optional, and are looking at many other metrics to determine, I mean, there were schools even, I remember back, around 15, 16, when I was looking at colleges, that had already moved past the SAT on their own because they had already determined for their own students, looking at the previous 10 years, that how a student did on the ACT or SAT test was a very, very poor predictor of how successful they're going to be at their school. Like Kalamazoo College was one school I was looking at. So, and now just everybody's pretty much looking at it that way. And so when you have a situation where parents aren't doing that extra bit, but we're not seeing a huge fall off in how our students are performing, I think that's kind of good news. Knowing it's not the high stakes test so much, but to see that the students are still performing and.
Yeah, and that's why the changes that you're talking about across the country with the importance of test scores and looking at college pathways, the lack of students investing as much time and money in test prep leading up to it is a lot of the reasons why, if you go out and look at the articles and the thinking out there of what's going on, is you see this fall in overall scores. You can see we're matching that with the rest of the country, right?
You could still have districts too that are putting a little bit more emphasis on that.
You could.
Just traditionally, because that's what their community wants. And that also, I mean, how do it's all these variables.
Correct.
Really hard to
Yeah.
compare districts right next to each other, across the state, across the country.
I think this is the most
I
kind of
think-
apples
I think
to
so, too.
apples. You're just comparing us to all the other test takers
Right.
that year.
Do you have any data on how many times kids take it, or, is it?
For us, it's that
Just
it's
the
that
one
one
in
test that's
April.
given in
Right.
April. Yeah, that's the one that counts for us.
Like,
We can get some of the other data, but the one that shows up on our school report card and the official one for us is that April one that's given. Whether that's their first one or their fifth one, that's the one that counts for us.
Yeah.
I do know that kids mostly take it more than once, so the scores potentially could get better over time. And
Sure.
I think if I'm hearing correct, that's not what we were looking at, right?
Yeah, if a student took another test outside of that, right, Gina, it doesn't count
Does
for
not
us or
factor
against
into
us.
our
but you'd hope, so we're administering it so late though, we're administering it in April.
Yeah.
And you're like, so I think back to my son, by the time he was taking that April test, he had already taken the test a few times, whereas my daughter Mary, who graduated a year and a half ago, she took it, we had her take it one time as just a practice, and then she took the test at school, and we didn't get her any extra, tutoring for it or anything, and I'm sure she might have done even better had we put, as parents, if we had put a little bit more into it, as we did with my son, but we just didn't see the
unnecessary,
value
yeah.
in that.
No.
And I don't think that we're too different than a lot of others. And that's, so I know that there's got to be less going on now than there was before.
There
If that's,
absolutely
I know it's anecdotal, my experience, but I think it's pretty typical.
And is the April test mandatory? I can't remember.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a graduation
Because
requirement.
the state uses that as their,
Have to do it to graduate, yeah.
Here in the school.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so there's some, like I said, there's interesting nuances when you look at the state level inside of here, and you really get the full picture, you have to kind of understand how this works. So this shows up on our school report card as meets and exceeds data, right? So if you're above the line, you meet or exceed. If you're below the line, you don't. But what's important is where Illinois sets that line. So SAT College Board would say you are meeting or exceeding if your score is above 480 on that. But Illinois has chosen a much higher bar of 540. So students that are scoring above that line aren't in the top half of test takers in the country. They're in the top third of test takers in the country, right? This is something that we as schools have had concerns about, because then when you compare Illinois students' performance in meets and exceeds to what happens in other states where they've picked the 480 bar or a lower bar, it's up to the state to pick where that line falls. So if you compare us to one of the other 17 states that use the SAT, you'll see that it looks like we're not performing as well on it in meets and exceeds data because we've picked a higher threshold. So, if you hopped on this, and I've seen this reported in some sources that everybody below that line is failing.
Right.
That's not at all
what
the
that means.
case. Everybody below that line is not in the top third of test takers. And then it works similarly for, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, but just so I'm reading this correctly, so that 480, is that the access line?
No, that's just, it's just for reference.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not indicated
All
on
right.
the graph.
Thank you.
And then for math, we stay at 540, but College Board would put that at 530. Okay? So, District 214's done a lot of work and advocacy around this, and this is who has provided us kind of the analysis. But the top third of, so as I said, that line is the top third of all students nationally. It's at the 65th percentile for meets and exceeds. So in that case, 41% of our students in English, 48% of our test takers in math are in the top third of all test takers in the country.
Did we know what the logic was, and when did Illinois go to this higher ranking?
So back when No Child Left Behind was left behind, and we went to ESSA, every state had to come up with a set of accountability measures and a standardized test. We needed a standardized test in English and math. Did we start with ACT or did we start? We started with SAT. Every state in the nation was required to have an English, a math, and a science test. I'll talk about our science test in a second. And then they were required to set their thresholds as to what would be meet or exceeds. So it's entirely determined by the state. The state of Illinois took great pride in the time that it was setting higher standards for students in Illinois, which that's great, that we have high standards in Illinois. It's not so great when you try to compare apples to apples across states.
Well, I think it's good that we've set higher standards. I think the challenge is just in the messaging then, right?
And that's why we're taking so much time at multiple board meetings to try to, I know the board has heard some of this several times, but, and Jill has prepared right now, which is, I'll do a quick transition, this little one-pager that we're starting to put out in the district office and around the schools, just to help the public better understand some of the nuances inside of these scores. So we're just trying to make the information more accessible as well. This is one that Gina shared in November, and I think this does a great job of illustrating that now, not with just raw scores, but the meet and exceeds percentiles. This shows us in blue, all the DuPage County high schools in aggregate in orange, and the state of Illinois in red. And remember, these go back to those cut scores, not percentile scores. So remember, those scores are falling across the nation. So that's why you see that downward trend. However, what's important to look at this is that District 99 is keeping the distance between our peers, right? So once again, comparing us to those other schools in English, you'll see a similar set of trends in math. Shows you that there isn't a massive drop-off when you compare kind of apples to apples. All right, Illinois Science Assessment. This is a fun one. So Illinois didn't really have a true science assessment when ESSA was put in place. So they had to quickly write a test. For the first several years of that test, it was up to the school district to determine which students would take that test So some, like,
It had
I
to be
think,
life science.
it
So
had to be a
what
life science
class
yep.
the students would have to take. So for us, our life science class is biology. So freshmen primarily,
Took it the first,
few years.
Okay.
First 2 or 3.
and then in 2019, it became juniors, right, across the state. Right, so if you go even on the Illinois School Report Card, it's very difficult to find any scores before 2021 because the tests continued to change from when it showed up until just the last couple of years. It is not a norm test. It is not like a high-profile test like the SAT or ACT. It's just written around life sciences in Illinois, and it is really written to meet that mandate. It doesn't count for anything for college admission or any of those pieces. Because of that, many juniors and their families opt out of this test. So, and because it's not a norm test, the state only measures participation in your score. So they'll give you this graph in the bottom right-hand corner of performance level, but really what goes into our score is participation rate. And for last year, we had 93.5% of juniors take the test. We were below the threshold of 95%. So we did not meet that criteria for next year. Regardless of like the student performance, you can see it was pretty strong on that, and we were pretty strong in comparison to others in the state on that test. But we did not meet for our accountability metric because of the number of students that chose not to take it. Because of the fact that it really means nothing to students, a lot of families decide, like, it's not an experience I want to engage in. One of the key things on the school report card that matches up with many of the board goals over the last 5 to 7 years is encouraging students to engage in high-level academic programs. So they do have this screen that has advanced academic programs that looks at things like early college courses, which are AP. For us, it's AP and dual credit. What you'll see there, everything in yellow, every number in yellow, is an increase from last year. It is a board goal that we increase those things year over year over year, and we have done that. Gina's done a great job of working with our curricular teams and teachers across the district to create more and interesting course offerings, and our students are taking advantage of those things. We know that when we talk about predictors of post-secondary success, one of the greatest things is taking an AP or a dual credit course that predicts success at the next level. Not even scoring high on the exam, just interacting with the content and the rigor of that course is a great predictor of post-secondary success.
What are the 9th grade offerings?
We don't have any AP
That's what I
offerings,
thought.
other than we will occasionally have like some students in AP computer science. We do have some dual credit that occurs more so at the 9th grade level. Once you get to 10th grade, you'll see more in computer science and US history, and then it, 11, 12 just explodes. Even in, obviously, dual credit too.
All right, other measures of success. These don't all show up on the school report card, but these are indicators that the board has requested of the administration over the last several years through our goal-setting process and our strategic planning. So many of these have been reported to the board in a variety of reports throughout the year, but this kind of pulls it all together into one spot. So AP enrollment's up, dual credit's up, capstone course is up, co-curriculars, extracurricular activities up. Those are all predictors of post-secondary success. TCD enrollment,
Right.
higher than we've ever had it,
I mean,
and we're on pace to shatter that number for next year as well.
Fabulous.
And we also have other emerging opportunities that the board has heard about, college and career endorsements. A couple of years ago, we were leading the state in that. The state's catching up, which is great, but we continue to expand the number of endorsements that we offer for that, and then our internship course that the board approved a couple of years ago that is got started during the pandemic, but is continuing to grow.
Yeah. The TCD.
Then finally, on that sheet was of our scores is the 5 essential survey. This is just based on completion rate. So it's not a rating of how we score on it, it's just do we get enough people to submit. So it's really important that our students and families and staff complete that survey. It helps with our scores, just based on completion. So we continue to encourage all of those audiences to complete that survey. All right. Any questions from the board?
It's just striking, just hopefully, the public is paying attention, right? Because there's so many factors to look at when we talk about how well our schools are doing right now. And if all you're looking at is SAT score and comparing that to the last few years, you could have some concern, and legitimately so.
Right, if you're seeing a falling number,
and it's not to say that isn't something that maybe we may need to pay some attention to, depending on what happens, going forward. You don't want that trend to keep going down forever, right?
But Mike, SAT scores have for 40 years. That's the curve for 40 years.
Yeah, well, true.
Yeah.
Very true. So, but there are so many other things that we're looking at here, and we're required to look at, and I think it's good that we look at all these things. So, I look at that TCD number, I'm like, what about that? What do you have to say to that? That's
huge.
That's huge. And because we know that all of our students are not going on to college. Most are not going to get a 4-year
Might not be the right pathway for
That's
everyone.
right.
Go to CSD too.
Yeah, some will do both, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So these dual credit classes we're having, the amount of participation we're having in more, it's nice to talk about more in AP, right? We want more, but the reason we want that is we want our students to challenge themselves, and they're doing that. And so this is a huge success. It's not perfect. There are things we'd like to be better. That's why we do what we do, right? And so we're never satisfied, but all in all, a good report. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, moving on. Student fees, this is an easy one.
I like this.
The administration is not recommending any increase for next year.
Everyone knows
So,
my history here.
I'll put on my Mark Stalen hat and remind the board that during times of high inflation, no increase is actually a decrease.
A decrease.
A good thing, yes.
Right. Yeah.
How'd I do, Mark?
Pretty good.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Didn't know how long that you're going to drag it out.
Yeah, I'm trying to transition between you and Jeree.
I'm known for that more than.
Mark, is there anything you wanted, or Jeree, anything you wanted to highlight on the actual returning fees? They are, as indicated, the same as they were last year.
I'll give one comparison.
Sure.
The top score, the top item, registration textbook, we pay for our students' textbooks. Some schools sell them, and they say they don't charge a fee, but they sell them the books, and that comes into a much higher than $350 fee. And then they try, kind of like college, they try and return them at the end of the year if they aren't eating, So that's I would just say it first.
Well,
Because it's hard to have people pay fees and not know exactly where it's going.
well, I appreciate this, and this is something I think, Mark, you've always responded, positively to my comments about this over the years. And my goal, I guess, now that I'm getting close to the end of my service here, one of my goals when I first joined nearly 12 years ago was to create less of a reliance. I'd like to see less of a reliance on these fees because they are not regulated in any way. We can charge as much as we want to charge, but yet, really I don't. There's this idea that while my kids are in school, it's okay for me to pay a lot more. And I've never looked at it that way. I mean, I don't have any students here anymore, and I am happy and proud, to be paying into this system, and I'm going to be paying for the school improvements many years, without, directly reaping a benefit from that, right? But I do, because I think those students we saw tonight, You know, they're our students. They're part of our community, and so, you know, this is something that can be a burden on people, on families, and it's really great that we're able to keep it level, because it is, in fact, you know, reducing our reliance on it, and it's a good thing. So, thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
I have a question.
Yeah.
We talked to some kids at South last semester, just in the government classes, and they were wondering, what do you do with the parking fees, or how do you set them? And
Yeah, I mean, the
I
cost
didn't know the answer.
Yeah, the cost is to help offset the maintenance of those lots. So snow removal, salting, you know, repaving, all of those things. That's why they were established over time. And then there's a high cost of security patrolling those spaces over the course of the school year. So it's offset for all of those costs.
And truly, you know, it's not something that, and when we talk about what your school is required to provide to the community, you know, providing parking spaces for students to park there isn't really.
It's not required.
Not really, right, so there's,
yeah.
right, so, well, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
so we do a pretty good job with it, I think, and so it makes sense that you might have to pay a little bit for it.
And the Village of Downers Grove has done a nice job of partnering with us to provide as much street parking as
Yeah.
they feel that they can as well.
Yep.
So they've been good partners with us over the years.
So I would just add lived experience of one. I work with 3 people who have teenage children in high school, in nearby, but not in DuPage County. And they were talking about registration fees, and they were talking about driver's ed. And some of them, because I was talking about,
Yep.
oh, my kids went to Michael's or whatever it was, and it was about the same as our driver's ed, which I think probably is more now outside of here.
Driver's ed's a weird one because isn't it regulated by the state as to how much we can charge for that one?
But
So-
they were all talking about what they were paying, and they were paying substantially more.
More, yeah, this is the best, our driver's ed is the best deal in town.
Not just in
Easy.
driver's ed and registration.
Yeah, overall, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, any questions on that one? All right, I'm assuming from this conversation, this is not something that the board would like to debate at a future meeting, that the board's comfortable with the administration's recommendation.
I am.
Not raising fees?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then there's no reason to bring it back for approval, because those are our current fees. All right, hybrid block schedule. Ryan's been busy. He's back in person again to talk about it.
Hi.
Yes, you know, I've been here a lot when they're giving me my own sign.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
You're a fixture now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so since I've seen you, I am continuing to get feedback from students and staff.
Good.
So just to connect to the strategic plan, you know, I've been going to kids and staff in person rather than sending out by email. So kids have seen me around the cafeterias, if I'm subbing for access, sometimes at South, and then also walking through the spaces for where teachers are, just to get their opinions on how things are going. And on just to revisit, the reason for moving to the schedule in the first place was for students to have an opportunity to get some help from teachers during the day, to have some flex time with our teachers for their professional development, by making sure that we've seen all of the research about starting later in schools and you know how that helps kids, so that consistent late start day, and then also offering opportunities for some deeper learning or enrichment on those longer periods. And so, since you have seen me, so October, November, and part of December is what I had been up to. And then I came here and made some recommendations. Following those recommendations, I went back out to the schools and talked with students about you know, their opinions about that, any tweaks that I needed to make before we made some changes for second semester access. I think actually Caitlin mentioned some of those at a board meeting or two ago about some of those changes. And then we also started looking at student choice. That one of the things that came across with student feedback and parent feedback was giving students more of an opportunity to have some choice in what they're doing during Access. And then also some of the concerns that people had with the schedule, either about having free time in the middle of the day or things like that. And so I started developing some plans and running them by kids, whether or not it was a principal student advisory or literally just walking table to table in the Commons. A student in a class today said, "Wait a minute, aren't you the voice of Access? I heard you." I'm like, "Yes, I am the voice of Access." That was unanticipated when I went into a classroom to check in with a teacher. He recognized my voice. So
Get him a name badge that says feedback.
yes, it is a recognizable voice. Since then, there's been 3 things that I've been working on, right? And I think the last time I spoke with you when I was on Zoom, we talked about some concerns that I'd be working on starting second semester. 1, students being concerned that they were not able to always hear the announcements. 2, the timing of C lunch, and 3, having too much free time blocked into the middle of the day. So for announcements for students, right now, at the end of the first block of the day, there's an extra 5 minutes on Wednesdays and Thursdays for announcements. After talking with the kids, whether or not they're in the locker room, they don't have a first period class, they're in a study hall in the Commons, something like that, that they haven't been able to always connect with those announcements. And so we're proposing just taking those 5 minutes, moving them into Access. All students would then be able to be in a classroom setting. If there's a video announcement, they'd all be able to see it. And so also if there's something happening in resource or an update for Access that day, that we can give it while they're all there. Largely, students and staff have supported that. Staff mostly, so it separates a little bit from the class and the announcement part, that, the Access and the announcements seem to be a better fit. And for students, it's making sure that sometimes when I've asked them, they've said like, we really want more career opportunities and resource. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we've offered several career opportunities and resource. And I'm like, yeah, but I didn't hear that announcement. So this will be able to help close some of those gaps for our kids. Right. The second one was about timing of C lunch. This was a hot topic that almost every student to the student, especially students who have C lunch, starting at 117 is not something they're fans of. So I've walked the cafeteria a lot on this one. Students and staff have just said that by the time that they've gotten to C lunch at 117, they've either snacked so much during the day that Chartwell's, I believe, has reported that there's actually fewer kids who go through the line during C lunch. Second, that they're just exhausted by the time they get to lunch, and they're like, I did have a student say, "I'm so tired, I don't even want to eat." And so we propose flipping periods 4 and 2 on Thursdays. And that would move C lunch up at about an hour and 20 minutes. The downfall of that is that A lunch starts at 10:25. And so I walked the cafeteria quite a bit about this. I talked to about 200 students in the cafeteria at South and about 200 at North. I did it during all different periods, A lunch, C lunch, 4th period resource, you name it. I've walked through it. And all of them have said that they support the change, that while 10:25 seems early, that 4th period lunch right now starts at 10:56. So students with 4th period lunch, they're not going to experience that much of a change. Other students have said that not everyone has a lunch both, and that if they have a 5th or 6th period lunch, their resource then lets them out of school for classes at about 2 o'clock. And then some students said that I don't eat breakfast, and so knowing that I'd have that dedicated time. Another piece of feedback that I didn't anticipate was that by having that period lunch in a different period, that there'd be more seats for kids. There's fewer kids in study hall during 2 and 3 than there are in 7 and 8. And so kids said that, you know, when I come down for lunch, there's actually going to be more free seats because kids who are in study hall that are also in the commons won't be there for a long period because they're not gonna, they sort of stake out a table and then that's not available for kids who are in lunch. The third consideration was just about free periods in the middle of the day. It's the same shift, right? By flipping period 4 to the beginning of the day and 2 after access, students who who wanted that same sort of freedom. So like Caitlin, what period do you have lunch?
I have 5th.
Oh, yeah, 5th. All right, so other students would say Caitlin's a little bit luckier than they are if they have 4th period lunch, right? Her senior counterparts with 4th period lunch say like, well, wait a minute. I have 8th period release for sports. I have 4th period lunch. So I have this big chunk of time right in the middle of the day. I would love the same opportunity that Caitlin has by being able to come late if I'm a junior or senior in good standing, as the kids that have 5th and 6th period lunch. Staff have said the same thing, that there's staff that have the flexibility of 5, 6, that you don't have that same flexibility of 4. Also, students said pretty openly that by having 4th period at the beginning of the day, they're more likely to use it as a study hall than they are after they've already had a class and access, simply because there's more kids that are rolling through. Some students have said, I have all of the intentions to study at the beginning of 4th period. And then I start talking with my friends, I get on my phone, I stop at the coffee bar, and then the 8th period lunch kids start to roll through. And so then suddenly 2 hours have gone by and they haven't used that time. So by moving it to the beginning of the day, when all of their classes are ahead of them, that they're going to be able to use that. Plus, there aren't going to be the lunch kids that are also rolling through because we have very few kids that have a 2nd period study hall because the day is just starting out. They'll either be a late arrival or an early dismissal. So on the next slide, this is what that draft looks like. Monday, Tuesday remain the same. Friday also remains the same. And so by flipping periods 4 and 2, we're able to move lunch into that 2-3 block. So 1, it creates more seats because we won't have kids in the study hall. 2, because 4th period was a lunch period, we weren't able to run it during this block. So by moving it out of that space, we actually can. And moving access, our announcements into access. So overall, I walked the cafeteria with the schedule again with several hundred kids, and also with the workspaces for a lot of the staff, especially staff that were considering part-time, making sure that they had an opportunity to see the schedule before their deadline of putting in for part-time. And a lot of the staff and a lot of the students have said, like, yes, especially 4th period being at the start of the day, that while 10:25 seems a little bit early for some of them, they're like, I will take it if I get 4th period at the beginning of the day. And a lot of the staff said things similar. One of the other things, I've attached a video. So I don't know if you got a chance to see the video. I'm not going to play the video now. This is, so the student that said, oh, you're the voice of access. This is a video that they just saw talking about student choice and access. So as we were talking with students in December, many of them said, sometimes I want to go see my teacher, but I can't get a seat. They've already given out their passes. Other teachers have said, I've given out my passes, but I know that you said only give out 3 on those days for each of us, but I give out 6 because I have more kids who want to meet with me. My partner, who also teaches in the same room, gave out 6, and we still had 20 kids who didn't leave without a pass. So now we have all of these kids in the room. And so students have said, like, you know, parents and students have said that sometimes on block days it feels long, and if I don't have PE that day, I want to move. Other kids said, like, I just need a quiet place to study. So we've built in a student choice model where students will have about 50 options with a set number of seats, and once those seats are gone, they won't be able to choose that anymore. So there's open gym is available. At South, the library is like puzzles, games, and things like that. At North, the library chose quiet study. We have collaborative study available, and then a wide variety of meet with my teacher for help. They can meet with their counselor, they can meet with one of the social workers or psychs if they want. And so students on, if you click to the next slide. Yeah. So as I talked with students, this is one of the slides I used in the screencast to hopefully that they've started to feel some of the changes that we've made in Access, right? We've simplified the Access schedule. We have streamlined some of the lessons. Seniors are maybe sometimes having a lesson that only they see, and then sometimes they have an autonomy day when the underclassmen are watching or experiencing a lesson. We've also made all of the student pass days on Wednesdays, so it makes it easier for teachers and students to have that same time. But it was that providing student choice to meet their needs. That's the part of this pilot that we're going to do on February 15th with our juniors and seniors that we're going to address. So on the next slide, I have a timeline of what that looks like.
And just for simplicity's sake, I keep calling this open table for our students, right? This is the opportunity, what Ryan's talking about, the student choice, is the opportunity for every student to kind of reserve their seat and what they need for that day. So student support with the pass is the teacher reaches out and invites the student into their space. This flips that the opposite direction, where the student then reserves the space that they feel that they need.
So on February 2nd, that video that I have linked in there, that's what the students watched. And they were also given access in their Google Classrooms to look at the list of things that would be available to them. So that on the 9th, so this coming Thursday, when they get to Access, the juniors and seniors, there'll be an announcement with some reminders. For example, open gym, please leave your backpacks in your locker. You won't be able to use the locker rooms, wear proper shoes, things like that. Then about 5 minutes into Access, I'll open the form, and all 1,340 juniors and seniors at South and 1,042 at North, they will make their choice on their form, and I will be sitting there making sure that the technology doesn't go haywire, so I won't sleep on probably Wednesday night. And then teachers will get a list of the kids who chose them, so that on the 15th, instead of reporting to their Access, they report to the room that they chose. And then on the 16th, they will get a survey asking me asking them, did you find a choice that met your needs? Overall, did you feel like you had a successful experience? And then do you have any suggestions before we run the next pilot, which will be with freshmen and sophomores mid-March? And then we'd like to do another pilot with all 4 grade levels. My goal is that we can run a couple of these student choice pilots between the SAT and AP testing, so that students that want to try to have a larger group sort of meeting with some of their AP teachers would be able to have that opportunity through this format. Also, that as we're looking through these pilots, there are plenty of flexible scheduling companies out there. And as the staff and students show that, yes, this is absolutely a direction we want to continue in, that we will start exploring using those, so that when we come back in the fall, that everyone has experienced it. And so it's not something new. I would love that as we try these pilots, that this is something where students and teachers can count on, oh yes, this isn't something new. This is something that we've done before. And so they're starting the year feeling comfortable about making those choices and how the system works. And that is it.
I got a couple questions. Yeah. So first of all, I want to commend you, because I think, you presented at our last meeting and the results of the survey, which had several thousand respondents. And the fact, when you say, I talk to students, you're not pulling 2 or 3 people aside and saying, hey, give me your opinion. I mean, you're literally talking to hundreds and hundreds of students, and I think that's important. And I commend you for that. if a student has a specific concern, or a teacher has a specific concern, what's the mechanism that they can?
Usually they just email me and say, hey, can you stop by? And so I am at North and South quite a bit.
Yeah.
So students, especially if I'm subbing their access at South, because they have more access rooms, and so they have fewer people available to sub. Students will ask. There was a U.S. history class at South that was doing debates about the schedule and things, and so students were emailing me questions and all that kind of stuff, which is great. I offered to come in, and that was like probably one step too far. They'd be like, no, it's an email. Yeah. Also, students are not shy about giving you their opinion if you just sit down at their table and speak with them one-on-one. That's why I haven't been doing a lot of like Google form surveys in between the last one. My next survey will come out March 20th, and I hope that we get even more responses, especially from families as well. But if you just sit down, like, how's it going? This is something I'm thinking about. Is there something that I'm missing? That they're pretty good about it. And so, but the student newspapers have reached out. I've done, quite a few interviews with them about that. We're going to a parent meeting on Wednesday at North.
That's where I was going to ask if there's,
I think Monday
Yeah.
at
Monday at
South.
okay.
So,
And then staff, we did virtual
Ask me
online
anything.
sessions, we
Yeah.
did drop-in sessions, so we've been available to staff as well.
yeah, for staff, it's, stopping at their supervisions or going into their department offices, things like that, knowing where, people hide. I know the staff at North far better than I do at
Yeah.
South since I
Yeah.
work there. And so I think they're a little bit more willing to just like reach out to me and say like, hey, come over here. And I'm getting to know the staff a lot better, so.
Well, my other question really was about, if we have a lot of students who can't get in to see their teachers, I mean, we're tracking that obviously, or we're getting it anecdotally. How are we gonna make it, open that up? So, I mean.
The first change was this semester of
Yeah.
putting all student support with a pass on the same day to kind of streamline that.
Okay.
So we heard first semester that there were some challenges in doing that, so that was our first step in that change. So now everybody's free across the building at the same time.
Yeah.
So,
And I think then with the student choice model, students will now be able to choose. After we move through the pilots, the good thing about also using sort of a third-party scheduler is that you can open it up to teachers a day before students choose, and the teachers that need to see, I need to see these 7 students, like, okay, I have 20 seats in my room for this, I'm gonna choose these 7, so that when it opens up to the students to make their choices, those students, their choice is already made for them, and then 13 other students can choose that spot.
or the other way, a kid could go to a teacher and say, I absolutely need to be with you. I can't fight for a seat. Like,
Yes.
I have to be with you.
Yes, I didn't get a seat with you last week.
Yeah.
Can you please choose me this week so that I make sure that I get a seat?
Yeah. So,
And as part of access, how do we communicate that to students? Does that come out as part of the announcements, or?
For the student support with the pass?
Yeah, I mean, how do we just communicate this? Because I'm not living it, it just seems kind of, and because it's new.
Yeah, so
it seems kind of
the
cumbersome.
teachers have a pass that they can invite students with, and that.
But if the student really needs to see the teacher, I mean, they know
There's a
how
lot
to-
of- yeah,
They
they-
know, how do
yeah.
they know how to say, Ryan, you gotta put me in because I'm really struggling? Mr. Ruger,
Well,
really
that's okay. I think some students are better than that than others. We do try to coach kids up about doing that. That this Thursday when juniors and seniors are choosing, that the freshmen and sophomores are doing something with student conferencing. So teachers in Access are, just asking kids, hey, how you doing? Do you need to meet with a teacher? Do you know how to reach out to that teacher? So we gave a list of prompts for teachers to kind of like coach kids up that aren't as good as maybe, asking for help. I also think that teachers are pretty good about going to their kids and saying like, I really need to see you. I want to see you during Access. And if a student says like, I'm already taken for Access, that they've like, here are my office hours. So those are also published on their syllabi.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it's not limited to access.
No,
There are
nor
office
is
Every
it-
teacher has 2.5 hours, yeah.
And any student requesting help from a teacher, they need to work together within 24 hours to find a mutually agreeable time to connect. So, and that's contractual, that's in the contract. So whether it's one of these formal things between office hours or access, or it's more informal of, I just need to connect with you, all of those things are expectations across the organization.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, I agree, I commend you for the work you've done on this, for talking with the students, because that's important, that we made this change and we're keeping them a part of the process. So, I think it's good, we'll see what becomes of it.
I have kind of a two-parter. So, one, knowing that there's a maturity level difference from freshman to senior year, and we think about how students are using their time wisely when they have choice in how to spend their time, what more can we do to help some of those freshman, sophomore students, and I don't want to pick on boys, but who'd rather play video games, and I'm really stereotyping, but anyhow, that seems to be a bit of an issue, I think. And then the other thing that I've heard is that we have instances of that age getting to go home early.
Not a freshman and sophomore.
That's not happening with 14 or
Junior and
15 year olds.
senior, in good standing, with parent permission.
Interesting, because I talked to one parent today who has.
Well, they might be signing their own kid out, but that wouldn't be, like, a parent can always pull their kid
Okay.
out of school, but that's not.
Well, that's good. That's good news for me, because I think that they definitely need to be here.
So far as using the time appropriately, it is a learning process, and our teachers, Ryan and I have talked to a lot of teachers about the different things that they're doing to try to set students up to be successful. So like, you've fallen behind in the class, so during resource, you should be working on these 2 missing assignments, right? Now, obviously, it's up to the child during that period. They're also reaching out to parents with similar things like that. But it's also important to recognize not every kid is going to be successful within that, and that's part of the learning process. We heard so much from kids that went off and left us, like that went off to college after us or wherever after us, that academically they were really well prepared for whatever came next. But they, over and over again, alumni would come back and say, I just wish you would have done a better job of helping me manage my time. Like, their days, if you look at a high school kid's schedule, they are scheduled in from when they wake up until they go to sleep at night for a lot of students, especially those in activities and athletics. And they're not given the opportunity to practice. The world's a lot different than like when we were kids. My parents would kick me out of the house and say, don't come back until dinner, right? And you had to manage your time. The world isn't that way anymore. So what these blocks of time allow students to do is to practice, but with the oversight of us there with them. To think that every kid is going to be perfect at it, no, that's why they get that opportunity to practice. When we look at this school year, it's only been about like 23 days, right?
Yeah.
That students have had these over the course of the year.
Yeah.
So there's been 23 opportunities to practice. Over a course of 4 years, students will have a lot of time to practice, and I expect that they will get better. The schools have also put in supports for students that demonstrate repeatedly that they're not being successful in that space, or if it's not playing out well in their classrooms, where we're building a little more structure around students in those settings. So by all means, is it perfect? No. But will it get better with time? Yes. The other thing that we're lacking this year that we won't be lacking in future years is older students that know how this works, that set the example.
I forgot about that.
Show their peers. All of our kids, all 4 grade levels, all of our staff this year are figuring it all out on their own. So our teachers are even learning as the course, what prompts work with kids, what nudges work, what assignments work. So our staff will get better at it. Our counselors get better at noticing which kids aren't being successful. And then kids, as they come into school, will see their older peers that have figured this out, setting the example for how we behave during resource, how we manage our time, what we do, and all of those things. Year over year, resource over resource, this will improve and get better. This is the first year, and, you know, it's not gonna be perfect, and it's not gonna be as good as it's gonna be, but every week we get better at this. Every year we'll get better at this. Hey, come this time next year, 50% of our students, this will be the only high school schedule that they've ever lived, right? So this is a long game for the opportunities that this schedule offers and presents.
I'm fully supportive, and I've been, you know, one of the things I've been responding to inquiries about, you know, we've gone through one semester, you know, and you know, we need to give it a chance. You know, we need to, you know, we knew rolling out something so new that there'd be some bumps, and we're trying to work through those things, and I think Ryan's done a great job here of presenting some solutions to respond to those issues going forward. But we've only been doing this for a very short amount of time, so, yeah.
And one of the commitments we made to the board and the public was to do what Ryan is doing, right? Many school districts would roll this out, and we're like, this is what we're doing. We're not gonna evaluate the programming. We've made a huge dedication this year and time and resources and time with the board in reporting out on what our experiences are and chasing after that goal within the strategic plan of valuing student voice. I think that's very apparent in Ryan's work here. So, you know, we'll get better at it faster because we are doing that program evaluation.
Follow up to my previous comments about the younger students. Are we having conversations with any 8th graders right now about what to expect the coming year and how to manage time? Is there something that our partner districts could do to help prepare and get those students?
9th grade orientation, like this spring we haven't, but on the way in, right?
I'm just wondering if because high school will be different for them anyway, they don't know anything.
Yeah, when you talk to 9th graders, and you ask them like, what do you think of the schedule? They're like, this is all I've ever known. It's great. You know, it's better than middle school, you know, so it's a different conversation than talking to a senior that has lots of different years to compare to.
Giving those 8th grade parents too an opportunity to have discussions with their students about what's going to be expected, and that there's going to be some time in the schedule, a couple days a week, where they're going to be expected to structure their time themselves and to do it in a productive way.
And things like Mad Dash and our
Oh, I know.
orientation at
Sure.
North, those things, even their peers will help them set that up. And I'll go
outside the
back
box
to,
there.
like this year during Mad Dash or 9th grade orientation over at North, no upperclassman there that was leading those sessions had ever lived the schedule before, right? So this year, as our 9th graders come in, they'll be like already sharing those tips and tricks and how to get around and how to make that work that none of our current students could share with our 9th graders this year. So, you know, year after year, having those upperclassmen to set the example will be important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Moving on, the next item for consideration is the issuance of not to exceed $2,880,000 general obligation limited bonds to be issued by the district pursuant to section 17-2.11 of the school code for life safety projects related to Downers Grove North Fiscal Building. The Board of Education will consider the adoption of a resolution providing for the issue of said bonds and the levy of a direct annual tax to pay the principal and interest thereon. The resolution sets forth the parameters for the issuance of said bonds and sale thereof by designated officials of the district. Mark Stalen, our district controller, will summarize the pertinent terms of these parameters, including the specific parameters governing the manner of sale, length of maturity, rates of interest, purchase price, and tax levy for said bonds. Mr. Stalen.
Right, so this is going to be for the fire prevention and life safety work at North High School. It was known to be there to some extent, but all of a sudden it just has deteriorated very quickly. and become unsafe. So this is what debt service extension base is designed for, to either use it for emergencies like this or some projects you need to move up, or for other projects that involve life safety, and working cash authority as well. So this stream that we have is protected by the Property Tax Cap Act. We don't violate the property tax cap. We still get the same amount when the tax cap came in, the same amount every year that we had for bonds when it took place. It was like froze that amount, and then each year you would have that much to work with in bonds, and sometimes you wouldn't use it for 5 years, and you used a big, big. This is going to be probably be the smallest one I think we've ever done. It's only going to be for $2.8 million, 2.88 actually. And it's important to know that this is a parameters action that we're asking you to take tonight. We haven't sold the bonds. In fact, we hadn't really even fully agreed on whether we're going to do a direct sale or a public sale. We were trying to do a direct sale where somebody we know or some buying, like other schools buy other bonds sometimes. And we couldn't get anybody to bite on that because the interest rates are 5% on treasury notes, and so they couldn't come back. Our cost is going to be, we believe it'll be less than 2.88 for the cost and the interest rate involved in it. So instead of going with the private sale where we'd have seen maybe a high 4.8%, we're going to get something in the 2.8 range, we believe. The parameters resolution here is for the president of the board and myself and the superintendent to be eligible to get to sign off on documents before the board, and then bring it to the next board meeting. We're going to do it in the market as soon as we can, wait for a good day to issue the bonds, and then get your approval. But this resolution is stating some parameters that we can't break when we do that. Public sale has been decided. 2.88 million is what we anticipate to be the total in cost, with all costs of, including costs of issuing the bonds, which is so our real interest on the bonds themselves are close to 2.5%. But 2.88 is the maximum that we would sell them at. Average will be for 6 years. The total won't, there's a timing on this authority. They want it to end, there won't be any bonds that would be sold that would go later than December 15th of 2029. It can't exceed a 5% interest rate. We expect the actual net total in cost, as I said, to be 2.82. For the taxpayer, it's really unusual. There's a lot of early interest payments that'll go on this one, so the impact is very low for the first 5 years, and it's only a 6-year bond. But those would be very low. Somewhere like, I think it's $12 for the average annual cost for these, and $22.63 would be, I'm sorry, the annual total amount for these over time. For an average $400,000, we did move it up to $400,000. I was almost going to do 100 and let you just keep adding it, right? But for a $400,000 home, like the first year is estimated to be $3.91, $3. So, and it gets until the very last year, to stay low. The last year it gets to be $40 because that's when a lot of the principals come due. It's just the way the bonds will be laid out into the market. Tax rate impact is 0.0094, which is, we have a larger than $5 billion assessed valuation, so we're very lucky that we can pass this on, and it's very little cost to the community members and the businesses and the taxpayers in our district. So those are the main things we need to keep an eye on when we're issuing them, and we hope to do it in the next week or two.
Any questions?
I'd just like to thank Mark for bringing this to us. I know it's something that we hope to take care of out of capital over a period of time, so it wasn't like we didn't know that we were going to need to do something here. But the urgency of what's happened has had to accelerate what we're doing. And, to be clear, if we didn't do this, it would cost it would
If
cost us
something went
a
wrong.
lot more. You know, the potential and the risk is
Galvanized-
huge.
Galvanized
Yeah,
metal.
right, well, in
Which
every,
we think were some close to the original sections of the building.
oh, I'm sure, yeah,
So,
yeah, no,
Very
it's,
old.
Well, and this is the same funding that we would have used a couple of years from now.
yes.
It's just we're accelerating it a couple of years earlier, just to make sure we avoid any
Additional
problems.
costs.
Any additional cost, yeah, yeah.
Anyhow, I'm happy to support this. So.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, I need a motion for the Board of Education to approve the resolution providing for the issue of not to exceed $2,880,000 general obligation limited tax school bonds of Community High School District Number 99, DuPage County, Illinois, for the purpose of altering and reconstructing a school building and purchasing and installing equipment therein for fire prevention and safety, energy conservation, and school security purposes, providing for the levy of a direct annual tax to pay the principal and interest on said bonds, and authorizing the sale of said bonds to the purchaser thereof.
So moved.
Second.
Mike and Chris? Any additional discussion?
Mike?
Aye.
Davenport? Thank you. Christopher Espinoza.
Aye.
Cheryl Fuller.
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye. So the motion is carried and said resolution adopted. Mrs. Nidek, please record the same in the records of the Board of Education of Community High School District 99, DuPage County, Illinois.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark, as always. Do we have any slips for the second
I have
reception?
one slip.
Okay, this is the second reception of visitors, which is intended for audience members to address the board on any topic pertaining to Community High School District 99. Comments are limited to 3 minutes to provide all visitors an equal opportunity to address the board. Individuals needing more time should submit their thoughts in writing to the board secretary. Visitors addressing the board need to submit a comment slip to the board secretary and will be invited to the microphone. Prior to addressing the board, audience members should state their full name. The proceedings are being tape recorded for the purpose of producing accurate meeting minutes. I, the board president, reserve the right to modify these protocols if circumstances warrant. Audience observation of these protocols is appreciated.
All right, so one speaker, Gary Baker? Backer? Bacher. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Bacher. I'll get it right next time.
All right, Gary Bacher, thank you for the time. I wanted to address, I guess, 2 topics in my 3 minutes. The state accountability metrics. Hank, I don't think your background's in math, I don't think. Mine is. I'm an actuary. I deal with statistics, probabilities, and I totally agree with you on the SAT scores, looking at raw scores, you can't look at the trends. But when you showed the percentiles for the SATs as well as the performance assessments, I see a downward trend. Downers Grove North is a statistically large enough group where those, maybe that one year, the 40 percentile, that is concerning, but otherwise you see a downward trend. And if I were any of you, I would be concerned. I agree things are maybe across the country, there are issues, but your focus is right here. And relative to others, it looks like our numbers are coming down. Crazy drastically? No, but they are coming down. That's my interpretation. Professional statistician, person based on the numbers that you shared, Hank. So I would, lots of factors. And Mike, I think you said this, lots of factors. We can't take all of them into consideration. I get that. But we need to take off our rose-colored glasses and look at the data and see what's happening. And then think about, maybe we shouldn't pat ourselves in the back. Maybe we should be saying, ooh, is there something here we need to do? So I offer that for your consideration. On the hybrid schedule, thank you for all your work. One thing, and I don't have perspective on this, but it seemed like you're gathering of feedback. A concern I had was, it seems like you're invested in the hybrid schedule, which is, totally get that. But if you're gathering feedback, I don't know if you're the gatekeeper of it. I'd make sure some of that feedback's coming through other people because you have a perspective. If you came to me in the Commons at lunch, and I'm a high schooler, I'm not gonna give you my full unfiltered view. It'd be better if got it through somebody else because you're the access guy. So that's something that I would offer. I was also very pleased to hear, again, Mike, I think you said this, that, hey, we're going to adjust. As we're going to monitor, we're going to adjust. Hey, we're not just going to put this out the way it is. And I would encourage you to say, well, what's the time that if you look at it and it's not working, that you go back to it? As a parent, I have concerns about the extent of teaching time, especially for young males in high school who maybe aren't self-sufficient. It's a reality. We might want to teach them. But I would say reflect on that, and that might be something you need to deal with. And don't be afraid to go back. If you ever do go back, won't be my problem. My kid will be out. But anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Do you have anything else?
I do have one thing. I just remembered my sticker. So, February 17th is Founder's Day in District 99. So that will be the day that the election was actually held to split the community into two districts 100 years ago. So we're doing a little celebration in each of the school. Jill and Lauren have led the charge with the principals and the activity directors to mark our 100th day. We have little stickers for everybody. We'll have stickers for the kids that day. And that officially kicks off the 100th year of the district, although next year will be our 100th full school year. So it's kind of weird how it worked in District 99. Our first graduating class actually split their year between the consolidated district and the separate district. So it's always interesting because we'll say it's our whatever year that North High has been open or the year of the district, but this is officially our Founder's Day is coming up. So February 17th, 2023, the district will have existed for 100 years. So a little celebration of that, but a little commemorative sticker for the board members that all the kids and staff will be getting that day as we celebrate. So just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you. 100 years. I remember it well. How about you? Okay, we need a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Mike and Terry, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.